One word. That was all it took to vaporize a $3 billion fortune in seconds. Matteo Thorne was the king of Wall Street, untouchable, arrogant, and about to sign the deal of the century. He thought the world was his playground, and people were just stepping stones. But when he looked at a struggling waitress named Emily and spat out the word stupid, he didn't just break a glass. He triggered a chain reaction that would destroy his empire before dessert was even served. You might think you know how this ends, but you have no idea who was really sitting at that table. This is the story of the most expensive insult in history. The view from the 45th floor of the Thorne Tower in Manhattan offered a perspective that Matteo Thorne believed he was born to possess, looking down on everyone else. It was 5:30 p.m. on a Tuesday in November. The city lights were just beginning to flicker on against the twilight, a sprawling grid of ambition and failure. Matteo didn't care about the failure. He only cared about the Helios merger. Matteo adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke Brioni suit, the fabric darker than the charcoal sky outside. He caught his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling glass. At 38, he possessed the kind of predatory handsomeness that magazine editors loved and competitors feared. Sharp jawline, eyes the color of cold steel, and a mouth that rested naturally in a sneer of disapproval. "The car is ready, Mr. Thorne," his assistant, Julianne, said from the doorway. Her voice trembled slightly. It always did. In the last 6 months, Matteo had fired 4 assistants. Julianne was lasting longer than most, primarily because she had learned to become invisible. "Do you have the dossier on Arthur Sterling?" Matteo asked, not turning away from the window. "Yes, sir. It's on your tablet. Mr. Sterling arrived at Teterboro Airport an hour ago. He's heading straight to Lorchidee." Matteo turned then, a shark sensing blood in the water. "Good. Sterling is old money, sentimental. He thinks business is about handshakes and character. He's a dinosaur." Matteo walked to his desk, a slab of imported black marble, and picked up his platinum fountain pen, twirling it between his fingers. "Tonight, I buy his legacy for pennies on the dollar, strip it for parts, and turn his beloved family company into the most profitable AI logistics firm on the East Coast. He won't even know he's been gutted until the ink is dry." The deal was valued at $3 billion. It was the capstone to Matteo's career. It would move him from simply being a wealthy CEO to an American oligarch. "Sir," Julianne hesitated. "The reservation. You requested the private alcove, but the restaurant manager called. He said the alcove had a plumbing issue. They've moved you to table 4. It's still prominent, but—" Matteo's eyes narrowed. "I don't do table 4, Julianne. I do the best table. Fix it." "I tried, Mr. Thorne, but Mr. Sterling apparently specifically requested the main dining floor. He said he likes the atmosphere." Matteo let out a short, derisive laugh. "Atmosphere. That's code for noise and commoners. Fine. If the old fool wants to sit among the plebeians, I'll humor him. It will make him feel like he's in control." He strode past her, the scent of oud wood cologne trailing in his wake. As he reached the elevator, he stopped and looked at her. "If I don't get a confirmation that the merger contracts are prepped by legal by the time I return, Julianne, don't bother coming in tomorrow. I don't pay for excuses. I pay for perfection." The elevator doors slid shut, sealing him in his golden cage. Matteo checked his watch, a Patek Philippe Nautilus, worth more than most people's homes. He was ready. He had studied Arthur Sterling for months. He knew the old man was 82, a widower, and notoriously private. He had no children, only a rumored estranged niece who had vanished from high society years ago. Sterling was weak in Matteo's eyes. a man who donated to orphanages and stopped to shake hands with doormen. Weakness was a disease, and Matteo Thorne was the cure. As the limousine navigated the dense traffic of Fifth Avenue, Matteo reviewed his strategy. Charm him first. Talk about legacy. Then, when the appetizers arrive, drop the leverage numbers. Show him that without Apex Global, Sterling Industries goes bankrupt in 6 months. Squeeze him. Break him. Sign him. It was a perfect plan. There was no variable he hadn't accounted for. Or so he thought. The kitchen of l'Orchidée was a symphony of controlled chaos. It was widely considered the finest French restaurant in New York City, a place where a single risotto cost more than a week's groceries. "Emily, Table 6 needs water, and Table 2 is asking for the sommelier." Emily Vance wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, careful not to touch her pristine white uniform. "On it, chef." At 24, Emily was exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't fix. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a tight, severe bun, highlighting her high cheekbones and tired, expressive green eyes. She was beautiful, but it was a beauty hidden behind the mask of servitude. To the customers of l'Orchidée, she wasn't a person. She was a pair of hands that delivered plates and removed problems. She grabbed a crystal pitcher of water and moved through the swinging double doors, transitioning instantly from the frantic noise of the kitchen to the hushed, velvet-draped elegance of the dining room. She moved with grace, a skill she had learned not in a restaurant, but in a life she had left behind long ago. But tonight, her hands were shaking slightly. Earlier that afternoon, she had received the call from the hospital. Her mother's surgery had been rescheduled for next week, but the insurance company was denying the claim again. They needed $40,000 up front, or the procedure, the only thing that would save her mother's ability to walk, would be cancelled. Emily had $300 in her bank account. She poured water for a couple at table 6, forcing a polite smile as the woman complained about the air conditioning being too aggressive. "I apologize, madam," Emily said, her voice soft and melodious. "I will inform the manager immediately." "You do that!" the woman snapped, not even looking up from her phone. Emily turned away, swallowing her pride. She was used to it. She had been working 3 jobs for 2 years. L'Orchidée was the best paying, but the clientele could be brutal. "Emily," the floor manager, a nervous man named Mr. Henderson, whispered as he grabbed her elbow near the service station. "Listen to me closely. We have a VIP at table 4 tonight. Matteo Thorne." Emily felt a chill. Everyone in New York knew Matteo Thorne. He was the face of aggressive capitalism. He was also known for getting staff fired for the slightest infraction. "I thought Sarah was taking the VIP section," Emily asked. "Sarah went home sick. Migraine," Henderson said, wiping his brow. "You're the best server we have left. Do not mess this up, Emily. Thorne is meeting with Arthur Sterling. This is a power dinner. If Thorne is unhappy, he doesn't just complain. He destroys reputations. If you get through this night perfectly, I'll put in that bonus request you asked for." The bonus? It wouldn't cover the surgery, but it would keep the lights on. "I can do it," Emily said, straightening her spine. "I won't let you down." "Good. They just sat down. Go. Wine list first. Be invisible." Emily took a deep breath. She smoothed her apron and walked toward table 4. 2 men were seated there. One she recognized immediately from the news, Matteo Thorne. He was younger than she expected, but his energy was radioactive. He sat with his legs crossed, dominating the space, checking his phone with a scowl. The other man was much older, perhaps in his 80s. He wore a tweed suit that looked expensive, but dated, frayed slightly at the cuffs. He had kind, weary eyes and a shock of white hair. He was looking around the restaurant not with judgment, but with curiosity. This was Arthur Sterling, the man Matteo Thorne intended to devour. Emily approached the table. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to L'Orchidée. My name is Emily, and I will be taking care of you this evening." Matteo didn't look up. He continued scrolling on his phone. "Sparkling water. Lemon. No ice. And bring the 82 Petrus immediately. Don't ask me if I want to taste it. Just pour it." His voice was dismissive, cold. He spoke to the air, assuming she would catch the words. Arthur Sterling, however, looked up and smiled warmly. "Good evening, Emily. That's a lovely name. I'll have the same water, please, but with ice. I'm quite parched from the flight." Matteo finally looked up, annoyance flashing in his eyes. "Arthur, you really shouldn't fill up on water. We have business to discuss, and the wine is costing me $4,000 a bottle." "Hydration is the key to longevity, Matteo." Arthur chuckled softly. He looked back at Emily. "Take your time, my dear." Emily felt a strange pang of familiarity when she looked at Arthur, but she couldn't place it. "I will be right back with your beverages and the wine list." As she turned to leave, she heard Matteo mutter, loud enough for her to hear, "Great. She looks like she's half asleep. If she drops that bottle, I'm buying the restaurant just to fire her." Emily's grip tightened on her tray. "Just breathe," she told herself. "Do it for Mum. Just get through the night." She returned moments later with the crystal glasses and the heavy bottle of Petrus. The tension at the table was already palpable. "So," Matteo was saying, leaning forward, "let's cut the pleasantries, Arthur. You know why we're here. Sterling Industries is bleeding. Your supply chains are outdated. You're hemorrhaging cash in the Asian markets. I'm offering you a lifeline." Arthur took a sip of water, his hand shaking slightly, a tremor of age. "I'm here to have dinner, Matteo. We can discuss the merger after the appetizer. I believe in breaking bread before breaking companies." "Sentimental nonsense," Matteo scoffed. He snapped his fingers as Emily approached. "Pour. Now." Emily stepped in, balancing the expensive bottle. She deftly removed the cork and began to pour into Matteo's glass. "Careful," Matteo hissed, watching the dark red liquid. "Don't drip." "I wouldn't dream of it, sir," Emily whispered. She moved to Arthur's side. As she leaned in to pour, a busboy rushing past with a tray of dirty dishes clipped her heel. It was a tiny bump, almost imperceptible to the room, but enough to throw Emily off balance. She corrected herself instantly, pulling the bottle back. Not a single drop landed on Arthur. However, a tiny, singular red droplet splashed onto the pristine white tablecloth between the two men. The table went silent. Matteo stared at the red spot on the white linen as if it were a bullet hole. "You clumsy," Matteo started, his voice rising. "It's fine, Matteo," Arthur said quickly, raising a hand. "It's just a tablecloth. No harm done." She saved the suit. Matteo turned his cold, steel gaze onto Emily. She froze. She saw no mercy in his eyes, only a deep-seated need to exert power. "It's not about the tablecloth," Matteo said, his voice dropping to a dangerous low volume. "It's about standards, and clearly you don't have any." "I am so sorry, sir," Emily said, bowing her head. "I will change the cloth immediately. It will only take a second." "No," Matteo said. "Leave it. I want you to look at it while you serve us. A reminder of your incompetence." Arthur frowned deeply. "Matteo, that is unnecessary." "It is necessary, Arthur," Matteo snapped, keeping his eyes on Emily. "This is how you run a business. You punish failure immediately. Maybe that's why your company is failing." Emily felt the heat rise to her cheeks. She bit her lip so hard she tasted copper. "Don't cry." Do not give him the satisfaction. "Is there anything else, sir?" she asked, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "Get out of my face." Matteo waved a hand at her like she was a stray dog. "And bring the appetizers. Try not to trip over your own feet this time." Emily retreated to the kitchen, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. "You okay?" Henderson asked, seeing her pale face. "He's a monster," Emily whispered. "He's a rich monster," Henderson corrected. "Just 2 more hours, Emily. Keep your head down." But Emily knew, with a sinking feeling in her gut, that the night was only going to get worse. Matteo Thorne wasn't looking for a meal. He was looking for a fight, and she was the easiest target in the room. Back at the table, Matteo took a sip of the wine, swirling it arrogantly. "See, Arthur, discipline. You have to keep the help in line, or they walk all over you. Just like your board of directors is walking all over you." Arthur looked at the young CEO, a strange, unreadable expression crossing his face. It wasn't fear. It wasn't submission. It looked almost like pity. "You judge people very quickly, Matteo," Arthur said softly. "Sometimes the people you treat the poorest are the ones who hold the keys to the kingdom." Matteo laughed. "Please, she's a waitress. The only key she holds is to the wine cellar. Now let's talk about the valuation. I'm lowering my offer by 10%. The game had truly begun. The arrival of the appetizers, a delicate plating of foie gras with a fig reduction, did little to warm the atmosphere at table 4. If anything, the air had grown colder. Emily placed the plates down with the precision of a bomb disposal technician. Her hands, usually steady after years of carrying heavy trays, felt numb. Every time she stepped near Matteo Thorne, she felt a wave of hostility radiating off him like heat from a pavement in July. "Enjoy your meal, gentlemen," she murmured, stepping back into the shadows of the service station, but staying close enough to attend to their needs. Matteo picked up his fork, inspecting the foie gras as if searching for a flaw. "You see this, Arthur?" he said, gesturing with the utensil. "This is what your company lacks. Presentation. Refinement. Sterling Industries is sloppy. You have redundancy in your HR department. Your logistics are managed by people who still use spreadsheets instead of AI. And your charitable arm is bleeding 5% of your annual revenue. It's unsustainable." Arthur Sterling took a slow bite, savoring the flavor. He dabbed his mouth with the linen napkin. "It is sustained by loyalty, Matteo. My employees have been with me for decades. They have families. They have mortgages. Cutting them loose to save a few percentage points. That is not how a Sterling does business." Matteo set his fork down with a clatter. He hadn't taken a bite, and that is why you are sitting at a $3 billion valuation instead of 10. You are running a charity, not a conglomerate. When I take over, the first thing I'm doing is liquidating the pension fund to reinvest in automation. Those loyal employees can find work elsewhere. The market doesn't care about their mortgages. In the shadows, Emily felt a sick lurch in her stomach. Her father had lost his pension 5 years ago, when his factory was bought out by a firm exactly like Matteo's. It had destroyed him. Hearing Matteo speak about livelihoods with such casual cruelty made her want to pour the bucket of ice over his head. "Control," she told herself. "You need this job. You need the money for Mum." Arthur sighed, looking tired. "You speak of people as if they are numbers, Matteo. Eventually, the numbers fight back." "Numbers don't fight," Matteo sneered. "They just get deleted." He snapped his fingers, the sound sharp and demanding. Emily moved instantly. "Yes, sir." "This wine," Matteo pointed to his half-full glass. "It's breathing too much. It's losing its edge. Cork it until the main course." It was a ridiculous request. A vintage Petrus needed to breathe. Corking it now would be a crime against the wine. Arthur looked like he wanted to object, but he stayed silent, watching Matteo closely. "Of course, sir," Emily said. She reached for the cork on the table. "And," Matteo added, his eyes raking over her uniform, "fix your collar. It's crooked. You look like you got dressed in the dark. It's distracting me from my negotiation." Emily's hand flew to her collar. It was perfectly straight. He was doing this solely to humiliate her, to show Arthur that he could make her jump. "I apologize," she whispered, pretending to adjust it. "Don't just apologize. Be better," Matteo muttered, turning back to Arthur. "Now the contract. I've had my legal team draft the final acquisition papers. They are in the car. I want us to sign right after dessert. No lawyers, no delays. Just two men making history." Arthur took a sip of his water. "You seem in a rush, Matteo. Usually, a deal of this magnitude takes weeks to close." "Time is money, Arthur, and I don't like wasting either." Matteo checked his phone again. "Besides, I have a flight to Tokyo in the morning. I want this done." Emily retreated to the kitchen, her hands trembling. "He's ramping up," Henderson, the manager, hissed as she walked past. "I can see it from the podium. He's getting aggressive. Is everything okay?" "He asked me to cork the Petrus," Emily said, her voice tight. "And he told me my collar was crooked. It wasn't." Henderson groaned. "He's power-tripping. He's trying to break the old man by showing he can break the staff first. It's a psychological tactic. Just hold on, Emily. The main course is coming up. The sole meunière. It's deboned tableside. Can you handle that? Or should I do it?" Emily looked at her manager. Henderson was a nervous wreck. His hands shook more than hers. If he tried to debone a fish in front of Matteo Thorne, he'd likely stab himself or drop the fish. "I'll do it," Emily said, steeling herself. "I've done it 100 times." "Okay. Good luck." Emily took a deep breath. She thought of her mother lying in the hospital bed, waiting for the surgery. She thought of the pile of bills on her kitchen counter. "I am strong," she repeated mentally. "I am invisible. I am steel." She picked up the serving cart and wheeled it out toward table 4. As she approached, she heard Arthur speaking, his voice lower, more intense. "Tell me, Matteo, why do you want Sterling Industries? Really? It's legacy manufacturing. It's not your sector." "Because," Matteo said, leaning back and spreading his arms, "it was my father's first job. He was a janitor at one of your factories 40 years ago. You fired him for taking a sick day." Arthur blinked, surprised. I didn't know that." "No, you wouldn't. You don't know the names of the ants you step on." Matteo's smile was predatory. "So I'm buying your company, and I'm going to dismantle it brick by brick. It's not just business, Arthur. It's a reckoning." Emily froze for a second. The malice in Matteo's voice was terrifying. This wasn't a merger. It was an execution. "Here is the main course," Emily announced, forcing her voice to be bright as she parked the cart. "Sole meunière." Matteo looked at her, his eyes cold. "About time. Don't butcher it." The tableside preparation of sole meunière is an art form. It requires patience, a steady hand, and a rhythm. The butter must be brown and nutty, the lemon added at the precise moment, the parsley fresh. Most importantly, the skeleton of the fish must be removed in one fluid motion, leaving the delicate fillets intact. Emily ignited the burner on the cart. The smell of brown butter and lemon filled the air, usually a comforting scent. But tonight it felt suffocating. She worked in silence. Spoon, fork, lift. Separate the spine. Her movements were fluid, practiced. She could feel Matteo's eyes boring into her hands, waiting for a slip. "You're taking too long," Matteo said, drumming his fingers on the table. "It requires precision, sir," Emily said softly, not looking up. "It requires a heater," Matteo snapped. "My food is getting cold while you play chef." Arthur leaned forward. "Let her work, Matteo. It's a beautiful tradition. It's antiquated, like you." Emily finished the first plate, Arthur's. She placed it before him gently. "For you, sir. Enjoy." "Thank you, my dear. It looks exquisite." Arthur smiled. For a brief second, his eyes locked with hers. He frowned slightly, tilting his head. Do I know you, miss?" "You look remarkably like someone I used to know." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She quickly looked down. "I have a common face, sir." "Stop flirting with the help, Arthur. It's pathetic," Matteo interjected. "Serve mine." "Now." Emily turned back to the cart to plate Matteo's fish. She lifted the fillet. As she transferred it to the porcelain plate, Matteo's phone rang loudly. A jarring, aggressive ringtone. He jerked his hand to grab the phone from the table, his elbow flying out. It happened in slow motion. Matteo's elbow connected hard with Emily's arm, just as she was lowering the fish. The plate didn't fall, but the sudden impact caused the heavy silver serving spoon, coated in hot lemon butter sauce, to slip from her grip. The spoon flipped. A spray of hot, oily sauce flew across the table. It splattered onto the paperwork Matteo had laid out, the $3 billion merger contract, and a significant amount landed squarely on the lapel of his $5,000 Brioni suit. The restaurant went silent. The music seemed to stop. The chatter at other tables died down. Matteo froze. He looked at his suit. He looked at the grease stain soaking into the grey wool. Then he looked at the contract, where a pool of butter was turning the paper translucent, blurring the signature line. He stood up slowly. He was shaking. Not with fear, but with a rage so pure it felt like it sucked the oxygen out of the room. Emily backed away, clutching the empty tray to her chest as a shield. "Sir, You hit my arm. Silence!" Matteo roared. The sound cracked through the room like a whip. You incompetent, worthless little..." Matteo's face was red, a vein bulging in his forehead. He grabbed the linen napkin and furiously wiped at his suit, which only smeared the grease further. He threw the napkin onto the floor. "Matteo!" Arthur stood up, his voice firm. "It was an accident. You bumped her." "I didn't bump her!" Matteo screamed, turning on Arthur. "She is clumsy. She is useless. Look at this. This is a legal document. This is a bespoke suit." He turned back to Emily, who was now trembling violently, tears welling in her eyes. She looked small, terrified, and utterly alone. Matteo stepped closer to her, invading her personal space. He leaned down, his face inches from hers, his voice dropping to a venomous hiss that was somehow louder than his scream. "You are stupid," he spat the word out. "Do you hear me? You are a stupid, low-class girl who belongs in a diner, not a place like this. You have ruined my suit, you have ruined my dinner, and you are too dim-witted to even understand the cost of what you just did." Emily flinched, as if he had slapped her. A single tear escaped and rolled down her cheek. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Sorry doesn't buy a new suit," Matteo sneered. He reached for his wallet, pulled out a $100 bill, and threw it at her. The bill fluttered down and landed at her feet. "There, take that. Go buy yourself a brain, and then get out of my sight before I have you arrested for destruction of property." The humiliation was total. People were staring. Some were filming with their phones. Emily felt like the floor was opening up. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to die. She bent down, her hand shaking, to pick up the bill, not because she wanted it, but because she didn't know what else to do. She was in shock. "Leave it," a voice said. It wasn't Matteo. It was Arthur Sterling. The old man had walked around the table. He stood between Matteo and Emily. He looked at the bill on the floor, then up at Matteo. The warmth was gone from Arthur's eyes. The weary, kind grandfather was gone. In his place stood the man who had built an industrial empire from scratch in the 1970s. A man of iron. "Pick it up, Matteo," Arthur said quietly. Matteo blinked, taken aback. "Excuse me?" "Pick up your money," Arthur commanded. "You do not throw money at people. And you certainly do not call a young woman stupid for an accident you caused." Matteo let out an incredulous laugh. "I caused? Are you senile? She dropped the spoon." "I saw you," Arthur said, his voice rising, resonating with authority. "I saw you check your phone. I saw you strike her arm. And I just heard you insult a human being who is working harder tonight than you have in your entire life. She's a waitress, Arthur. She's a nobody," Matteo yelled, losing control. "Stop defending the help and sign the damn contract. We have a deal." Arthur looked at the contract on the table, stained with butter. He looked at Matteo, whose face was twisted in an ugly mask of entitlement. Then Arthur did something unexpected. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a pair of reading glasses. He put them on and looked closely at Emily. He looked at her eyes, green, expressive, shaped exactly like... Arthur gasped softly. He reached out a trembling hand and touched Emily's shoulder. "Turn your head, my dear," he whispered. To the left. Emily, confused and crying, obeyed. Arthur stared at the small, crescent-shaped birthmark just behind her ear. He paled. He looked from the birthmark to her face, stripping away the severe bun and the waitress uniform in his mind's eye. "Emily," Arthur breathed, his voice shaking. "Emily. Vance?" Emily looked up, sniffing. "Yes, sir. That is my name." Arthur's eyes filled with tears. "Vance. Your mother. Is her name Sarah?" "Sarah Vance." Emily nodded, terrified. "Yes. How do you know that?" Arthur Sterling turned to Matteo Thorne. The look on his face was terrifying. It was the look of a man who had just found a lost treasure and realized someone had tried to smash it. "The deal is off," Arthur said. Matteo froze. "What?" "The deal," Arthur said, his voice echoing in the silent restaurant, "is dead. I will not sign. Not now. Not ever. Get your lawyers. Get out." "You can't do that!" Matteo stepped forward, his fists clenched. "We have a verbal agreement. I'll sue you. I'll bury you. You're walking away from $3 billion because I yelled at a waitress?" "No," Arthur said, putting a protective arm around Emily's shoulders. "I'm walking away because you just insulted my granddaughter." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Matteo's jaw dropped. He looked at Emily, then at Arthur. What?" "Sarah Vance is my daughter," Arthur said, his voice breaking with emotion. "She ran away 30 years ago because I was rigid. Like you. I have spent 20 years looking for her. Private investigators, agencies, nothing. She changed her name. I thought they were dead." Arthur looked down at Emily, tears streaming down his face. "I have a granddaughter. And you." He pointed a shaking finger at Matteo. "You just called the heiress to the Sterling Empire stupid." Matteo looked at Emily. The nobody. The waitress. If Arthur was telling the truth, the girl standing in the grease-stained shoes wasn't just a server. She was the sole beneficiary of the very company Matteo was trying to buy. She was worth $3 billion, and he had just thrown a $100 bill at her feet. Matteo Thorne felt the blood drain from his face. For the first time in his life, he didn't have a comeback. Arthur looked at Matteo with pure disgust. You wanted to buy Sterling Industries? You wanted to strip it for parts? Well, the owner is standing right here. Why don't you ask her if she wants to sell? All eyes turned to Emily. The silence in L'Orchidée was absolute. It was the kind of silence usually reserved for cathedrals or graveyards, heavy and suffocating. Matteo Thorne stood with his mouth slightly ajar, his brain misfiring. He was a man of data, of calculated risks and projected outcomes, but there was no algorithm in his world that accounted for the waitress he had just humiliated being the lost heir to the fortune he was trying to acquire. "This is ridiculous," Matteo finally choked out, his voice cracking. He looked around the room, seeking validation from the onlookers. This is a con, a setup." He pointed a trembling finger at Arthur. "You planned this. You hired an actress to stage a family reunion, to leverage a better price. It's pathetic, Arthur, even for you." Arthur ignored him completely. His attention was solely focused on Emily. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a silk handkerchief, monogrammed with the initials AS, and gently offered it to her. "Here," Arthur said softly. "Dry your eyes, child. No Sterling should ever cry in front of a man like him." Emily took the handkerchief, her hand still shaking. She felt like she was floating outside of her body. "I don't understand," she stammered, her voice thick with confusion. "My mother. She never talks about her family. She told me her father was a mechanic." Arthur let out a pained, ragged breath. "A mechanic? Yes, I suppose I was once, before the patents, before the factories." He looked at Emily with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Your mother ran away on a rainy Tuesday in 1994. She was 18. I wanted her to study law. She wanted to study art. We fought. I told her if she walked out that door, she was on her own." Arthur closed his eyes, a single tear escaping. "I have regretted those words every single day for 30 years. I hired private investigators, but Sarah, she was smart. She knew how to disappear. She changed her name, moved states. I didn't know if she was alive or dead." He opened his eyes and looked at the birthmark behind Emily's ear again. "But that mark, and your eyes. You have her eyes, and my mother's chin." Emily felt a sudden, sharp pain in her chest. The reality of her life, the struggle, the poverty, the fear, crashed against this new reality. "If you are who you say you are," Emily whispered, her voice hardening slightly. "Where were you? Where were you when Dad died in the accident? Where were you when Mum got sick? We lost the house. We lived in a car for 3 months. I had to drop out of college to pay for her meds." The words hit Arthur like physical blows. He swayed slightly. "Sick? Sarah is sick." "She's in the hospital right now," Emily said, the tears starting again. "She needs surgery on her spine. I'm working here tonight because we need $40,000 by Monday or—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Arthur turned pale. The glass of water on the table rattled as he leaned against it for support. 40,000. She is suffering for pocket change. To a man worth billions, $40,000 was less than he spent on gardening. To hear that his daughter's life hung in the balance over such a sum was a knife in his heart. "Oh, bravo," Matteo interrupted, clapping his hands slowly. The sound was jarring. "Great performance, really. You almost had me tearing up, but let's get back to reality, shall we?" Matteo stepped forward, regaining his composure. He smoothed his greased lapel. "Arthur, you're emotional. You're old. You're seeing ghosts. Even if this girl is your long-lost whatever, it doesn't change the contract. We have a fiduciary duty to the shareholders. You can't tank a $3 billion merger because you found a relative in the soup kitchen. He turned his cold gaze to Emily. And you? Look at you. You're a waitress. Do you even know what a merger is? Do you know what EBITDA means? Of course not. So do yourself a favor. Take the $100 I gave you. Actually, I'll make it 1,000. And go away. Let the adults talk. Emily looked at the $100 bill still lying on the floor. Then she looked at Matteo. Something snapped inside her. For years she had been invisible. She had been the girl who served the coffee, who cleaned the tables, who took the abuse because she had no safety net. She had swallowed her pride so many times she felt like she was choking on it. But looking at Matteo, this man who had everything and valued nothing, she felt a surge of rage that burned hotter than the shame. She didn't look at Arthur. She looked straight at Matteo Thorne. I know what a merger is, Emily said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. Matteo rolled his eyes. Oh, do enlighten us. It's when two entities combine to create something stronger, Emily said, stepping forward. She wasn't trembling anymore. But sometimes it's just a parasite attaching itself to a host to drain it dry. That's what you are, isn't it? You don't build things, you break them. Matteo's smirk faltered. And as for EBITDA, Emily continued, her voice gaining strength, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. I know what it is. I was a finance major on a full academic scholarship at NYU before I had to drop out to save my mother's life. A murmur went through the restaurant. People were standing up now, watching the showdown. Emily took another step toward Matteo. I might be a waitress tonight. I might be wearing a uniform. But I have never, in my life, been as stupid as a man who thinks he can buy respect. Arthur Sterling watched her, his eyes wide. He saw the fire. He saw the steel. That's her, Arthur whispered to himself. That is a Sterling. Matteo flushed red. He was losing control of the narrative. You listen to me, you little... No, you listen, Arthur roared. The power in his voice silenced Matteo instantly. Arthur stepped beside Emily, presenting a united front. He looked at Matteo with a clarity that was terrifying. You asked a question earlier, Matteo, Arthur said. You asked if she wanted to sell. Arthur turned to Emily. He looked at her with profound respect. Emily, as of this moment, I am transferring my controlling interest in Sterling Industries, 51% of the voting stock to you. It is your birthright. It should have been yours years ago. Emily gasped. What? Sir. Arthur, I can't. You can, Arthur said firmly. You are strong, you are loyal, and you have a moral compass, something this room is severely lacking. Arthur turned back to Matteo. So, Mr. Thorne, you are no longer negotiating with me. You are negotiating with the majority shareholder. Ask her. Matteo looked like he was going to vomit. He looked at Emily, the woman he had called stupid, the woman he had thrown money at. He needed this deal. His own position at Apex Global depended on it. If he walked away with nothing, his board would crucify him. He swallowed hard. He forced a smile that looked like a rictus of pain. Miss Vance, Matteo stammered. Look, we got off on the wrong foot. It's been a long day. High stress. I'm sure you understand pressure. He spread his hands. The offer is $3 billion. That makes your share over $1.5 billion. Cash. You could save your mother. You could buy the hospital. You could buy this whole city. All you have to do is sign. It was a temptation that would break anyone. $1.5 billion. An end to the struggle forever. Emily looked at the contract on the table, stained with the butter sauce. She looked at the pen. Then she looked at Matteo's face. She saw the greed in his eyes. She saw that he didn't respect her. He just wanted what she had. If she signed, he would destroy her grandfather's legacy. He would fire the workers like her father. He would gut the company. Emily reached out and picked up the contract. Matteo let out a breath he had been holding. "Smart girl, just sign on the last page." Emily held the document up. The thick paper crinkled in her hands. "You called me stupid," Emily said. It was a figure of speech," Matteo lied. "And you said I didn't understand the cost of things," Emily continued. "I think you're the one who doesn't understand the cost, Mr. Thorne." With a sharp, ripping sound, Emily tore the contract in half. Matteo screamed, "No!" She put the two halves together and tore them again, and again. She let the confetti of billion-dollar promises rain down onto the butter-stained tablecloth. "The answer is no," Emily said calmly. "Sterling Industries is not for sale. Not to you. Not today. Not ever." The sound of the paper tearing seemed to echo endlessly. Matteo Thorne stared at the pile of shredded paper on the table. His face went through a kaleidoscope of colors, pale white, mottled red, and finally a sickly purple. You idiot!" Matteo shrieked. He lunged toward the table, grabbing a handful of the scraps as if he could glue them back together. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You've just burned $1 billion. You're not just stupid, you're insane." He turned to Arthur, wild-eyed. "Fix this, Arthur. She's clearly mentally unstable. She's a waitress. She can't make these decisions." Arthur looked at Matteo with cold detachment. "She is the majority shareholder. She just made a decision, and frankly, it's the best business decision I've seen in years. We don't partner with bullies, Matteo." Matteo was hyperventilating. He pulled at his collar. "I'll sue. I'll destroy you both. I'll buy the bank that holds your debt. Mr. Thorne," a new voice cut in. It was Henderson, the manager. He had been watching from the sidelines, terrified, but the tide had turned so violently that even he knew where the power lay now. "Mr. Thorne," Henderson said, his voice unusually steady, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Matteo spun around. "Excuse me? You're kicking me out? Do you know who I am? I can buy this building and turn it into a parking lot." "You are disturbing the other guests," Henderson said, gesturing to the room. "And you are harassing our staff." Henderson looked at Emily with a mix of awe and apology. "And you have insulted the guest of honor." "I'm the guest of honor," Matteo yelled. "Not anymore," Henderson said. He signaled to the security guard standing by the door. "Please escort Mr. Thorne out." Two burly security guards in dark suits stepped forward. Matteo backed away, bumping into a chair. "Don't touch me, I'm leaving. This place is a dump anyway." He grabbed his briefcase. He looked at Emily one last time. "You'll regret this. You'll be back scrubbing floors in a week. You walked away from a fortune." "I walked away from you," Emily said. "There's a difference." Matteo stormed toward the exit, his expensive shoes clicking on the floor, but he wasn't done being humiliated. As he reached the door, the hostess, a young girl named Chloe, who had often been the target of Matteo's rudeness in the past, stepped in his path. "Sir," Chloe said sweetly. "Get out of my way," Matteo snarled. "You forgot to pay the bill," Chloe said, holding up the check folder. Matteo froze. "Pay the... Arthur invited me." "But the deal is off," Chloe smiled, her eyes dancing. "And according to restaurant policy, the person who ordered the wine pays for it. You opened the Waitress, that's $4,000. Plus the appetizers." Matteo looked at the crowded room. Everyone was watching. Phones were recording. If he ran out on a bill, it would be all over the tabloids by morning. Billionaire cheapskate dines and dashes. With a guttural growl of rage, Matteo ripped his black Amex card from his wallet and threw it at Chloe. "Take it! Take it all!" Chloe caught the card effortlessly. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne. I'll just need a moment to process this. Our machine is a little slow tonight." Matteo stood there, fuming, while the entire restaurant watched him wait. It was the longest 2 minutes of his life. Back at table 4, the atmosphere was entirely different. Arthur ignored the scene at the door. He was looking at Emily as if she were made of glass. "Emily," he said gently, "we have much to discuss. But first things first." He took out his phone and dialed a number. "Edwards?" "Yes, it's Arthur. I need the helicopter ready at Teterboro in 30 minutes. "Yes. And call Dr. Aris Thorne at Mount Sinai. No relation to the fool who just left. Tell him I need the best neurosurgical team assembled immediately. My daughter is coming in. Sarah Vance. Yes. Private room. The best care. Money is no object." Emily put a hand over her mouth, sobbing softly. "You'd do that? After she left?" "I would give every penny I have to see her well again," Arthur said. He hung up the phone and took Emily's hands. "We are going to the hospital. Tonight. We are going to fix this." Emily looked down at her uniform. "But I'm on shift. I can't just leave." Henderson appeared again. He looked like he wanted to bow. "Miss Vance." "Emily, please go. Your shift is covered. Indefinitely. In fact, take the rest of the year off. Paid. With a bonus." Emily looked at Henderson, then at Arthur. For the first time in years, the crushing weight on her shoulders began to lift. "Thank you," she whispered. "Come, my dear," Arthur said, offering her his arm. "Let's go get your mother. We have a lot of yours to make up for." Emily untied her apron. She folded it neatly and placed it on the table, right next to the shredded contract. It was a symbolic changing of the guard. The waitress was gone. The heiress had arrived. As Emily and Arthur walked toward the exit, the restaurant erupted. It started with one person clapping, then another. Then the whole room was on its feet. They weren't clapping for the billionaire. They were clapping for the girl who had stood up to the bully. They were clapping for the waitress who had won. Emily walked past Matteo Thorne, who was still waiting for his credit card receipt. He looked at her, his eyes filled with hate and envy. He looked small now. The expensive suit looked like a costume. Emily didn't stop. She didn't even look at him. She walked out the door into the cool New York night, where a black limousine was pulling up to the curb, not for Matteo, but for her. As the heavy door of the limo closed, shutting out the noise of the city, Emily took Arthur's hand. "Grandpa," she tested the word. It felt strange, but good. Arthur squeezed her hand tight. "I'm here, Emily. I'm not going anywhere." Inside the restaurant, Chloe finally handed Matteo his receipt. "Here you go, sir," she said. "Oh, and Mr. Thorne." Matteo snatched the card. "What?" "You have a little something on your suit." She pointed to the massive grease stain. "You might want to get that cleaned. It looks stupid." Matteo Thorne walked out into the night, alone, defeated, and $3 billion poorer. 6 months had passed since the incident at Lorchidee. But for Matteo Thorne, it felt like 6 lifetimes. New York had dubbed him the Billionaire Bully. The video of his meltdown had gone viral, and the financial fallout was catastrophic. Without the sterling merger, Apex Global's stock cratered. The board ousted him. His friends vanished, and the banks seized his assets. Now Matteo stood on the sidewalk of Fifth Avenue, shivering in a coat that was 2 seasons old. He wasn't looking down from a tower anymore. He was looking up at one. The Sterling Vance building. Arthur Sterling had officially retired, handing the company to Emily. Under her leadership, the company hadn't been gutted. It had been modernized with compassion. The value had doubled. Matteo fixed his tie. He had an appointment, not for a takeover, but for an interview. A headhunter had mentioned a mid-level logistics manager role. It was a humiliating step down, but he was desperate. He waited in the lobby for 30 minutes, ignored by the happy staff bustling around him. Finally, he was escorted to the top floor, the same floor where he had once looked down on the world. Sitting behind the large oak desk was Emily. The severe waitress bun was gone, replaced by confident waves and a tailored suit. Beside her, in a comfortable armchair, sat her mother, Sarah Vance. She looked frail but recovering, a glow of peace on her face. "Have a seat, Matteo," Emily said calmly. Matteo sat. The chair felt small. "Ms. Vance, I didn't expect to meet with you directly." "I take an interest in all potential hires," Emily said, "especially the ones who tried to destroy my family." Matteo swallowed hard. "Look, Emily, I know I behaved poorly, but I am good at what I do. I know logistics. I built Apex Global." "You built a house of cards," Emily corrected him gently. "And you built it on the backs of people you didn't respect." She picked up his resume. "You're qualified on paper, but here at Sterling, we don't just look at skills. We look at character." "I've changed," Matteo lied. "I've had time to reflect." "Have you?" Emily asked. She reached into her drawer and pulled out a small, crumpled object. She placed it on the desk. It was the $100 bill he had thrown at her. "I kept this," Emily said, "as a reminder. You thought this was what my dignity was worth." "I was under stress," Matteo stammered. "Stress reveals who we really are." Sarah spoke up softly. "Emily was under stress that night. Her mother was dying. She was broke. Yet she treated you with kindness until you made it impossible." Emily leaned forward. "We are acquiring Apex Global, Matteo. The deal closes tomorrow." Matteo's eyes widened. "Then you need me. I know that company inside out." Emily smiled sadly. "No, Matteo. We need leaders who serve, not bosses who rule. I brought you here to tell you that the logistics manager position has already been filled by Julianne, your former assistant. She's flourishing here." Matteo felt the blood drain from his face. Julianne, the woman he had fired for making excuses. "And second," Emily continued, holding out the crumpled bill, "I wanted to return this." Matteo stared at her hand. "Take it," Emily said, her voice devoid of malice, filled only with pity. "You look like you need it more than I do." It was the ultimate reversal. Matteo took the bill, his hand shaking. He realized he hadn't just lost his money. He had lost his humanity. "Goodbye, Mr. Thorne," Emily said definitively. Matteo walked out of the building into the cold, grey afternoon. He headed toward the subway station, a place he had never had to visit before. As he descended the stairs, a young woman, rushing with a coffee, bumped into him, spilling a little on his sleeve. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry," she cried, terrified. The old Matteo would have screamed, but he looked at the Sterling building towering above him, then at the crumpled bill in his hand. He let out a long, weary sigh. "It's okay," Matteo said quietly. "It's just a coat." He stood alone on the platform, $3 billion poorer, waiting for the train, and that is how the King of Wall Street lost his crown to the very person he tried to crush. Matteo Thorne thought that power came from the wallet, but Emily Vance proved that true power comes from the heart. It's a classic reminder that the toes you step on today might be attached to the foot that kicks you out tomorrow. Emily didn't just save her family's legacy, she rewrote the rules of the game. She showed us that you can be successful without losing your soul, and that sometimes The biggest deals aren't signed with a pen. They're sealed with character. What do you think? Did Matteo deserve a second chance, or was his punishment fitting? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of karma and redemption, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching.